Welcome back to another episode of Synthpop Reviews. In this episode, we're going to focus in on one specific new wave band that's one of my very favorites. It's Thompson Twins. We're going to go through their discography, and I will identify what I think are the 3 best albums by Thompson Twins and the 10 best songs by Thompson Twins. Let's get started. Now, for me, Thompson Twins was my first synth-pop band or new wave band that I got interested in. My older sister became a fan of this band, and a boyfriend of hers had given her a mixtape with some songs by Thompson Twins, and she shared it with me and my older brother, and we both just fell in love with this music. The mixtape had some of the best songs from 3 or 4 of the Thompson Twins albums, and we would listen to it over and over and over, and I quickly became a huge fan of this band. As you probably know, the core band, Thompson Twins, were Tom Bailey, Alana Curry, and Joe Leeway. There certainly were other band members at the beginning of their band that got kind of left behind, and then also later Joe Leeway left the band, but the core kind of classic Thompson Twins lineup is Tom Bailey, Alana Curry, and Joe Leeway. And Thompson Twins started out as a post-punk band that was experimental with their sound, but they eventually became very successful, very popular, and became known for the hooks that they would put into their music. Many of their best songs are just loaded with hooks that get stuck in your head, you can't get them out of your mind, and you want to go back and listen to them again. It's very catchy, addictive music, in my opinion. For me, one reason I was drawn to this band so much was definitely the vocals. I just really love Tom Bailey's vocals and also the backing vocals. So let's go through each of their major albums, and I want to point out some of the best tracks on each album. Let's start off with A Product Of. This is Thompson Twins' 1981 album, and to be honest, I don't love this album much at all. This album is much more guitar-oriented. It's not yet sounding much like new wave, or certainly not synth pop, and so honestly, there aren't any standout tracks on this album for me. So let's move on to the second Thompson Twins album, which is called Set. And Set does have a single or two in it that I think stand out. In the Name of Love, I think was their first big hit. And it really is a good song. It's enjoyable. I like it. That, for me, is the main highlight, though, on Set. But let's move on to their next album, Quick Step and Sidekick, which is a big step forward for this band. Quick Step and Sidekick starts off with one of the highlights on the album, Love on Your Side, followed by one of their most famous tracks, Lies. And Lies is followed by a personal favorite of mine, If You Were Here. It's a beautiful song. It's got haunting atmospherics, and the lyrics are interesting. Another highlight for me is We Are Detective. If you haven't heard this song, you've got to listen to it. It's a really fun, kind of quirky song, but it's got a lot of personality to it, and I just love We Are Detective. I think it's a great one. Next, we get to Into the Gap. This is Thompson Twins' huge breakout album in the United States. It brought them great success, and it still is considered to be a classic 80s new wave album. In my opinion, each of these songs kind of stands out in a special way from the other songs. They're all distinct. It's not like you're hearing the same song over and over. And there are several hits here and other songs that I think could have been hits. Let's start from the very first one, Doctor Doctor. Just a classic 80s new wave synth pop song. And you follow that up with the second track, You Take Me Up. Just a beautiful song that I love. It's fantastic. Follow that up with Hold Me Now, which was a big hit, one of their very best songs. But I love the next 2 songs as well, Day After Day and No Peace for the Wicked. These are both great Thompson Twins songs, in my opinion. You follow that up with The Gap, another really strong track on the album. Next is one of the all-time best Thompson Twins songs, in my opinion, called Sister of Mercy. The vocals on this track are amazing. I think it's Joe Leeway singing the falsetto in it, but it's just a beautiful song with amazing lyrics, and it's kind of a haunting story and song overall. The album finishes with 2 more beautiful songs that I really love, Storm on the Sea and Who Can Stop the Rain. Now, if you're counting, you'll notice notice that I mentioned every single song on the album. That's because it's just that good. Every single song is worth listening to. This is definitely a classic new wave synth pop album. This album was recently re-released with a second disc that has other tracks and different mixes. For me, it was more than worth the purchase price. It's a great album to have. Next, we get to the follow-up album to their big 1984 Into the Gap, and that is Here's to Future Days. This came out in 1985, and again, for me, this is classic new wave synth pop. It's Thompson Twins at their best. The album may not be quite as strong as Into the Gap, but it's full of more beautiful songs. The highlights for me are the second track, Lay Your Hands on Me, another beautiful song that sounds great. Future Days, I love. Roll Over was not a hit, but I love that song. The song Revolution is a Beatles cover, and it's fantastic. I love it. King for a Day is another standout track. Just a wonderful song. And my other favorites from this album are Emperor's Clothes, Tokyo, and You Killed the Clown. Yes, I am spotlighting You Killed the Clown. I think it's a beautiful song. I think it's really a good one. Again, I enjoy every single song on this album. I could have mentioned the other songs as well, but those that I mentioned for me are the highlights. Next, we get to 1987's Close to the Bone. Now, at this point, there's a shift in the band. Joe Leeway leaves the band. My older sister that introduced me to Thompson Twins at this point told me the band is going downhill. They're not what they used to be because Joe Leeway left. And she might be right. And this album is a little bit less synth pop heavy and new wave sounding. It's a little less what I love about music. But it still has some good songs on it. I really like Get That Love. It sounds like it could have come off of Into the Gap or Here's to Future Days. I like Long Goodbye. I think that's a good one. And there's some other decent tracks on this album as well. Next, we have 1989's Big Trash. And this album continues the trend of maybe not being as good as their classic two albums, but there still are some songs that are really good. And back in the day, I would listen to this whole album over and over, and I really enjoyed the whole thing. But at this point, the standout tracks for me are Sugar Daddy. This one was played on the radio quite a bit. It's a fun song. It's a good song. Another standout is Bombers in the Sky. That actually is my favorite song on this album. And there are some others worth listening to, Salvador Dali's Car, and a couple others that are kind of enjoyable. Okay, next we get to their final album as a band. Alana Curry and Tom Bailey give it one more go with this album. And there's a couple good songs. I like Come Inside. My Funky Valentine is actually pretty good, but there's not too much here that is indispensable, in my opinion. So that's my run through the Thompson Twins discography. Like I said at the beginning, I just love their music. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to go through and name my 3 favorite albums by Thompson Twins. This is going to be pretty easy, I think, for me, and you can probably guess what they are. I would say my favorite album is Into the Gap. Every song is good. It's a classic album. My second favorite, Here's to Future Days. It's almost as good as Into the Gap, in my opinion. And their third best album, in my opinion, is Quick Step and Sidekick. It's got 4 songs on it that I think are classics that you must have, or at least they're favorites of mine. And there's other good songs on there too. So those are my top 3 Thompson Twins albums. In no particular order, here are my 10 favorite Thompson Twins songs. I'm going to have to put If You Were Here high up on that list. I think it's one of the very best. So If You Were Here, You Take Me Up, Hold Me Now, Doctor Doctor, Sister of Mercy, Lay Your Hands on Me, and I'm going to say King for a Day, Who Can Stop the Rain, and I'm going to slip in Bombers in the Sky from their 1989 album Big Trash. And then finally, I've got to put We Are Detective in my top 10. So those are 10 songs. I know I didn't pick necessarily their 10 biggest hits, but for me, these are my 10 favorite Thompson Twins songs. So thanks for listening or watching this episode of Synth Pop Reviews. I hope you'll come back again for the next episode. And in the meantime, please check out my website, synthpopreviews.blogspot.com. There you'll get not only embedded YouTube videos of these episodes and also music videos and things from synthpop bands, but you'll also get a link to my synthpop CD collection. It's a great way to find new music that maybe you haven't heard of, and it's also the best way to contact me. If you have questions for me or suggestions, you can make comments right there on the blog. And if you happen to be a synthpop band, especially an underground synthpop band, I love underground synthpop music, reach out to me, and I'd love for you to send CDs to me that I could review. That would be fun. Or if you want to suggest other synthpop music that I should listen to or review on the podcast, just let me know. In the meantime, thanks for listening.